The last week or so have been defined for me by two words, and I want to talk about them because they're there. The words are grace note. Grace note. And I have been experiencing grace notes in my life. A lot of them. These kind of unexpected moments that tie everything together, that are just like the moment that says yes to who you are and the yes to your life, and kind of give you this kind of tap on the head and make you feel it's kind of like the end of an orgasm, but it's like this the final beautiful, perfect moment. And you can't make these moments happen. You can't position yourself for it. It just occurs. We were at what turned out to be the last performance for me of Ghost, the musical in Los Angeles. And we had gone the night before, and I was very hesitant to go the second night. But we had things compelling us to go, and I just went, okay. The night before had been perfect for me, just really wonderful. And I just thought, to make the trip down to the theater, the Pantages, and all the stuff that involved, it was like, it brought up resistance, and we all know what resistance is, and we all have it for various things. And every time in my life I have gone against resistance, meaning I have not let it dominate me, I have operated in spite of it, something wonderful happens, always. So it's almost like a sign of, if you are experiencing resistance to something, it's not a sign to turn away, it's a sign to go through it. That may not hold up for everything, but mostly that's how it's worked in my life. So we went to the theater, and this performance for me was wonderful. It reached a level of emotion that I hadn't experienced in quite a long time. And I didn't know it was the last time I would see it as a fully staged production, but it felt like it. And I was thinking when I was watching the show how happy I was to be part of this world. When I was a little kid, my mother and father had very few record albums, but they had Oklahoma, and they had South Pacific, and the sort of Rodgers and Hammerstein canon, they're all there. And we used to play them all the time, Some Enchanted Evening, Oh What a Beautiful Morning. I mean, these songs were part of the definition of my childhood. And I really loved them. And the idea that I would have a chance to be part of that world was always like invisible. I mean, there was no way that a guy who can't sing, who can't dance, who can't write music, who can't play the piano would have a life that would actually be touched by musical theater, which I just love. And so at the end of the show that night, we were standing in the lobby, and there were people coming over to say congratulations and saying goodbye to a lot of people who were there. And I went with the whole cast again. It was just a beautiful night. And all of a sudden, somebody walked over to me and said, "I want to introduce you to Shirley Jones." And Shirley Jones was the star of Oklahoma, the movie. And she was an elegant, elegant woman. And she came over to me to tell me how much she loved my musical. And all I could do was go, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. She was the living embodiment of that world, and she had come as a way, as an act of grace, to just go, you did it. And it was so fulfilling. It was so beautiful. It was not grand. It was not Beethoven moment. It was like, perfect. And I was so grateful to her and told her. And I don't think she'll ever understand how meaningful it was that she just appeared, but it was really beautiful. And then a few days later, we were in San Francisco. We wanted to take Talia on a ride on the cable cars. We had talked about cable cars as an inducement to get her to moving from Seattle to San Francisco, so we got her on the cable cars. And I realized as we were riding the cable cars that they were the exact line that I used to take when I was a kid. I lived in San Francisco for one summer. It was the summer where I was going to leave school and just find my way into another world. Probably I thought Hollywood, but I don't know why I was in San Francisco. But it was the coldest time ever in San Francisco in the summer, and I couldn't ever get warm. And I had an apartment where in the morning I would get up and stand on a chair above the stove and turn on all the burners just so I could kind of get the heat as it rose. And then I'd have to get on these freezing cable cars because they're all open and ride all the way down to this place on Market Street where I used to work. And I worked selling cameras, and I knew nothing about cameras. How I got the job I will never know, but it was one of the best teaching experiences I ever had. I had a man who I worked for who was really a horrible, horrible human being, and he had a little box window above the selling area up on in the balcony, and he would look down at us, and if we leaned forward and put your hand on the counter, the phone would ring behind you, and he would say, "Get your hand off the counter." And I would go like this, and it was really a miserable place to work. But he taught me one amazing lesson. He taught me how to sell. And what he told me was, when you take that camera off the shelf to sell it to somebody, hold it as though it's a piece of gold or like a most beautiful diamond ring ever. And you take it and you hold it with a kind of preciousness. And then you bring it to the customer. You bring it to them like this. And then you have them lean in to look at it. And as they lean in to look at it, pull it back. And just keep doing that and keep caressing it and saying how wonderful the shutter is and the lens cap and whatever else you're talking about, the weight of the body, but don't let them touch it. Do not let them touch it. And they will keep leaning in and you will keep pulling back, and there will be a moment where they will reach for the camera like they have to take it. That's your sale. When they do that, you've sold the camera. And I've discovered that that works in everything. Just everything. Even in the musical Ghost, Matthew would find a way, our director, to end a song without giving the audience a chance to applaud. He would just end it so that the next scene would start to happen, and the audience would feel this, like they wanted to give something to it. But he did it so that when you got to the end, which was not always that far away from where he would withhold, the audience would just burst into applause and cheering because they'd held it in, and he engineered their holding it in so that they would finally have an outlet for it, and it always worked, and it was really wonderful. So it's like there's a withholding and a giving, and a withholding and a giving, and in a sense, we all have to do that in life. If you want to be able to bring somebody into you, you have to make them lean in to what you're offering. They have to want it. They have to reach for it, and when they finally reach for it, you have them. So I was remembering all this as we were down on Market Street, and we were standing in a whole plaza that did not exist when I was there. The camera store was gone. It was now this big hotel. And I'm there with my granddaughter. I'm there with my son. I'm there with my best friend Larry and his partner. We were all together, and it was like, how did I get here? It was like so beautiful. It was so wonderful. The journey I had taken from that camera store, which led me, I have to say, to saying, I'm not ready for the world. I have to go back to film school. I have to go back to the world. I have to get my credentials. I have to build a life. That's the lesson I got from that camera store, from standing in that space. And I had gone back into the world to build a life, to build the world that I had to have in order to have this moment. And this moment was, look what you did. You did it. You had a life. You had a life. This granddaughter, my grandson wasn't there because he was home with his mom, but the sense of wholeness, the sense of it was good. It was good. I got a little worried because I thought if they're giving me all these grace notes, maybe it's the end of my life, and I should be ready to check out. But I am totally ready to check out. If that's what this is about, thank you for the ride. It was absolutely terrific and wonderful. But what's so important, and this is something, it happened when the plane landed in San Francisco. actually Oakland, where we landed. I got off the plane and I was just swept over by a feeling of such happiness. Just happiness out of nowhere, just came in. And I went, oh, and we had a really difficult time. Blanche's bag was missing, and we had to have them ship the bag to our house, and the rental car was a problem. All these things were problems. No tension. No tension. We just rode through it. We got at my friend's house. He had rebuilt his house. It was a beautiful, beautiful house. And I was amazed. A small house, but just like perfect. Everything in it was perfect. The choices were perfect. And this is a friend of mine since we were high school. And he's finally got to build the house he wanted. And we're in our 70s, but it's like completion. It's like things are coming together. It's like you have to live a life for the grace notes to occur. You can't have you can have little grace notes, but the big grace notes happen because you've given yourself over to a whole life and you've lived it. And it doesn't mean that you've had a life of success, accomplishment, wealth. I don't care what all these things that we all think of as defining elements of life. It's that you had a life. You had a life. You had a lovely, beautiful ride. There were wonderful moments. There were terrible moments. There were gorgeous experiences. There were ugly experiences. That's the totality of life. But the fact is you had it. And if you are willing to surrender yourself to what is, and in a way, I guess, what was, you will discover the beauty of what you have experienced, the beauty of having been alive, having been in this world, having touched life, and having had life touch you. And I have this idea, I don't know that it's true, but today is an interesting day because it's the final match of the World Soccer Cup. And it's happening as we speak, in fact, which is really kind of interesting because something happens in games, ball games particularly, which I'm really fascinated by. It's true one-pointedness. You have a ball, sometimes the size of a baseball, sometimes a football, soccer ball, but an entire stadium of people is focused completely on that ball. And it's moving at rapid speed sometimes, and yet everybody is in it. And there's like one-pointedness in a way that brings us into a collective state that is remarkable for its power. And what's happening with a game like this is the whole world, well, clearly not everybody, but vast numbers of the world are all watching this ball on television, in the stadium. They're all over in this collective oneness. And the stillness of our class today was profound. I mean, truly, I didn't want to teach class today because I wanted to watch the soccer game. So I'm recording it. God knows if it's worth watching a recorded game. But I didn't want to teach. But I wouldn't not teach. That's just not how I work. But what was happening during class was the stillness of the class was worldwide. That what was happening in this small space was amplified everywhere. We were touching one-pointedness in a way that was beyond belief graceful. It was so pure, so perfect, so wonderful. And it was, in a sense, because the world had for a moment stopped all of its craziness. It didn't have anywhere to put its why didn't you do this for me yesterday, or all that stuff that goes on in people's heads. All of that was gone, and it was all focused on the ball, the oneness. And we were sitting here collecting that. Rudy used to go to the theater. He used to go to horror films. And his idea was you go to a horror film, and you wait for everyone in the theater to go scream and yell, and he would go, and he would suck up the energy. He just became this, he found there was enormous energy, and he could have it. Nobody else wanted it. They were throwing it into the atmosphere, so it was his. And he would take it in. Well, that's kind of what you're doing on a day like today. You're sucking in the energy of that stillness. It's all available to us. It's ours. You can use the world's energy for yourself because it's there. It's available. All that stuff about that they're doing when the ball almost goes into the net and doesn't, that's energy. And it's worldwide. It's everywhere. It's yours. It's yours. Drink it in. Drink in the energy of life. Enjoy it. You can also give it back. You can also go yourself. It's kind of wonderful to participate in that kind of collective gasp that keeps going on in the middle of a soccer game. So, we're all in this enormous state of being. And the thing I think I've come away from all this with, the thing that's growing inside me as an understanding, is life itself is a grace note. You recognize them under certain conditions. There are certain moments where you go, oh, and you go, oh. But there's no reason you couldn't, in a way, do that all day long. That perfection that life sometimes reveals to you in its tiny little blip of a moment is actually constant. The perfection that we live in is constant. And that last week in San Francisco, where Blanche and I found a new house in San Rafael, we saw Josh's house in San Anselmo, which was lovely. Blanche found a farm for her horses in Petaluma, which is run by this wonderful woman with a huge heart, and her staff there is so kind. I mean, the goodness of the experience that we had, the constancy of such wonderful people being around us. It felt such a gift. But then I also understood that my heart has been so open for so long now. I mean, it's just partly because all these years of study with Rudy. Rudy, when I was with him for like less than a year, he gave me a hug, and I kind of melted into that hug. And he said, that's what love is. Love is what you feel when your mother hugs you and you're 2 years old. That's what love feels like. And I have been feeling that for years now, and I walk around feeling this enormity of love, and I've learned to feel it for every person I'm with. It's like, I have to put it in a different way, because it's not like Bruce is loving anybody. It's like this space is love, and it's emanating. It's just everywhere. It just comes out. And I've become less and less involved in Bruce doing, as opposed to just love being. And I've understood that anyone who opens their hearts, anyone who does the work, Rudy taught me what love felt like. He taught me how to breathe into my heart, how to open my heart, how to open my gut, how to open my whole being to the world. And the feeling of all of that, it's different in each chakra, but the feeling in the heart really is enormous love for life itself and for people in it. And after a while you learn how to find your way into every manifestation of it, because some people are really easy sponges, they just absorb love. And then there are people who don't come near me with that love. And so when I meet those people, what I feel happening is a little bit like a river moving around rocks. It just moves around and through them, but it's trying to break them down. It's a constant force, and it doesn't matter if it takes 100 years. It just keeps working and flowing, and in time that rock is diminished. The resistance is gone. So for me, the love just keeps flowing, and I see how it works. And I see how it works on everyone, and I don't have a time agenda here. I don't care if you get it right now. I don't have to break you into a million pieces. Why? It's going to do what it wants to do. Now, if you're doing your work from your side, what happens is you go, please help me to open. That creates little cracks and fissures inside you, and the water goes, and it goes right through, and it breaks you apart. That's where two people are working together. You sit in meditation, you say, please help me to surrender, and this energy comes and says, here you go. And it just gives you what you need to turn yourself around, to make yourself other, to break yourself down. All of these things start to happen because you've given yourself over to this process. But it doesn't matter if you do, because this doesn't change for me. The love keeps pouring out, whether you're sitting there drawing it, or whether you're sitting there saying, prove it, show me. I don't care. I really don't care, because it's not going to stop. But here's what I've also come to understand. I get to live in a state of love. I live in that state. Whoever this Bruce is living in this state of grace. It's not a grace note, it's grace. And it's the grace of being open to what is. And I am not unique, I am not special, I'm not somebody who, has been to the mountaintop. I'm just a guy who did his work for my life. And what happens is, as you open your heart, anybody who opens their heart will discover there's love. And you get to sit in that love all day long. Some days it's not love, some days you don't feel it, some days it's like, you got to take the car in, or you got to do, there's all these obligations in life. But after a while you just go, okay, that's what it is, that's what you have to do. But the opposite of that is what I call toxicity. So many people sit in a state of and the toxic nature internally is so unpleasant. Why would anyone want to live there? Well, it's not that they want to. Most people don't know how not to. They don't know that there's an alternative. And if I came to them with love and blessing, their response would be, they would have no idea how to embrace it. Nothing in them would be open to it. Love would be a challenge, it would be a curse, it would be a statement that everything about them is wrong. That's really what happens. If you're living in toxic space and love is presented, you have to say, you've got to look at yourself and go, I'm choosing toxicity. I'm choosing the dark side. Why? Because I've had it my whole life and you're not going to tell me my life was wrong and bad choices. So you support the stupidity of your choices, the ignorance of your choices, by not letting it go and just opening to the love that wants to come through. This simple, constant state of grace. It's available. It's always available. It's never not there. And I will tell you, even if you get to look at the big, big picture, you will discover that your toxicity is grace. That's the bizarre part of all this. Your misery, your anger, your hostility, your suffering, all of that stuff ultimately leads you to one place, and that is, let me out of here. Help me to surrender, help me to let go, help me to free myself. You can't go anywhere but there, because ultimately the pain is too great. In the worst of conditions, you say, God help me. You do. And you don't know what God is, but you're asking God to help you. And what is God? It's love and grace. And it comes into your life and it just fills you. And I think, I can't swear on the Bible or anything that this happens, but I think the last moment of your life is the great grace note of your life, no matter what your life has been. Suddenly they just go, and you get it. You just get it. It's a blessing. Your life was a blessing. Your journey through this was a blessing. And I think, again, this is my imagination, but I don't think it's totally wrong, that at the very end of your life, there's like the multitudes of ancestors. I sort of envision them in a stadium, and you're kind of like the soccer player who got the ball in the net, but it's not quite like that, because you're in this stadium and they're all going, they are applauding and cheering that you lived a life, that you went through it, that you served God. Because what is this other than God experiencing his totality or her totality or its totality? God being and expressing itself in the world because it wants to touch life, know life, feel life, understand life, whatever the purpose is. None of us know the answer to that. Whatever it is, we've gone through it, and a lot of us go through it with a lot of pain and suffering. And at the end, I think they just go, like taking you when you're a 2-year-old, they hug you to their breast, the universe hugs you to its breast and says, thank you. Thank you for showing me myself. Thank you for living this journey. Thank you for the pain you were willing to suffer to be part of what I am. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I have a feeling there's something right about what I'm saying. And we'll find out. I've had enough hugs in my life, enough grace notes, enough insights into and experiences of this embrace, that if that's not what it is, I don't get what it is. That's all I can say. It's so ultimately beautiful and so full of wonder and grace. Any questions? Yeah, this isn't kind of a question thing, is it? Anyway, as always, thank you for coming. I love you guys so much. And onward.